Well, Hafaday, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to talk about different issues, like local issues and the general election, which, can you guys believe, is like right around the corner. Yeah, some of us will be very happy and very sad that day, but nonetheless, it's almost here. For those of you that don't know, my name's Hannah.
Hi everyone, my name is Matsuki.
And I am Daniel, the anime and movie lover. So let's just get, intros out of the way. How'd you guys find yourselves here talking to the KUAM crew?
Me first? Yeah, sure. So I'm Nolan Flores. I'm 22. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Guam. I serve in the Guam Youth Congress as the University of Guam's representative there. I was just asked to be here to talk a bit about, what we feel are issues as youth. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm Mateo Mortera. I'm the chairman with the Generation of Promise. And Nick reached out to me and asked me if I'd be interested in coming, sitting down with you guys and chopping it up, see what we can do. Talk about voter apathy and why we're involved in this type of stuff and come up with some solutions. So, yeah.
Generation of Promise. I'd love to hear more about that later on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know you guys brought some topics that we can talk about. Anyone want to go first? Well, actually, did you?
She didn't.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's fine. No, I'm Kiana Yabut. I am a student and upcoming graduate of the University of Guam this December. I'm also part of an organization called Family Rights. If you guys have heard of it, really proud of that. And now I'm here to talk to all of you guys. Have a great time.
Yeah.
I'm Rick Nicholas. I'm an alumni of the University of Guam. I have my master's in public administration and my undergraduate in business. I currently work in the private sector, and I do a lot of work with the public sector, a lot with law enforcement. And so I'm just excited. Thank you, KUAM, for bringing us all together, and thank you, our generation, for sitting down with us and just sharing your ideas. I think it's great. And like Mateo mentioned earlier, the more that we can come together and share topics like this, I think the more people will come out and share their ideas, their voice will be heard. And at the end of the day, I think the one thing we can all agree on is the more that the electorate participates, the better it is for all of us, right? And so I know there's not a lot of topics we agree on, but I think that's the one topic we all agree on. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah. All right, so let's just jump into it. I know you guys brought things you want to talk about. We'd like to start it off.
So, there's this big issue, guys. I'm pretty sure that you've heard of it. There are less people our age in our generation, Gen Zs, millennials, who really don't vote. And, well, for me, when I hear people, their main concern as to why they don't vote is it's just because they're not being listened to. Do you guys agree with this?
I think that there's some truth to that. I think from what I have seen as a young person, I think a lot of the reason why people don't vote is because they just don't really care and they don't see how voting for these people affects them in their daily life. But something that I always tell my friends and I always tell people is that if you don't vote, then you don't get a say in how you live your everyday life. And so I definitely think that's part of it, but I think what's important to note is that people should see that the people in government quite literally run the day-to-day basis of our lives, and it's important that we choose people who we want that we feel represent us. So for me, that's like what it is. Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback off of that because very much agree with that.
Do so.
I think people, they don't. A lot of young people don't see that it's important, especially in our generation. But it is, and even the little things from potholes in the road, like little things like that, all depends on who we elect into office. It's not always those big issues. Not everybody cares about those huge issues. Yeah. But it's even the small little things such as that.
Yeah. Gas prices? Come on.
Right.
Yeah. when it comes to like voter apathy, I think there's a lot of different factors that play into it, especially in a gubernatorial election, right? It becomes so polarizing, so toxic. There's so many like distractions. Candidates oftentimes aren't focused on issues, and I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's something that our generation needs to hold them accountable on, right? We need to bring it back to the issues, talk about the things that are important to us. I think there's a lot of issues, and I hope we can discuss those issues. And one of those issues that concern me, and I mentioned it earlier because I work with law enforcement, is crime. And so, if you guys can share, what are your thoughts on crime on the island? Do you think our leaders are doing enough to limit it and to stop it? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a bit more to be said about that apathy, right? That lack of efficacy that exists among youth. Like,
Yeah.
so our generation, the group that Kiana and I are representing, right? The youth component of the Lou and Josh campaign, the All In campaign, is focused on making that connection, like Kiana, like Hannah, like Rick said, to why youth feel that what they do doesn't really matter in the grander scheme of things, right? So what we've been trying to do that is connect those issues, like you said, the small issues, like potholes, the larger issues like crime, to what youth can do. Because we see that youth are like leading the way in a lot of things, right? You look at the climate action movement, right? You look at the women's rights movement. Youth are leading the way in those arenas, right? And so we just need to make them realize how that translates to actually participating in politics, in elections, and actually voting. So that's been our challenge, and I think we've done pretty well at connecting them to those issues and getting them to vote.
Right, and you know what? I like what you just said, because we all kind of have it innately in us to fight for what's right, and we have these movements that are out there, and I think our generation, and not your group, but like our generation has forgotten that when it comes to voting, exactly as she said it before, you have a choice. And what I tell my friends is, if you don't vote, you can't complain, man. And what I see is that there's just not enough of a push to understanding what exactly our government does for us. And if we don't like it, we absolutely have the choice on who goes into office and who can make these decisions. So, yeah, I think educating our demographic is very important as to what can happen and what our leaders can actually cause and affect when they get into these seats.
Yeah.
So, going back to what I was saying earlier, right? We mentioned potholes. I mentioned crime. I think we as a generation need to put the elected officials to the fire and talk about these issues. If it's hard for us to talk about, then we can't expect them to talk about it, right? And so my issue is crime, and so I'm kind of throwing it out there. What are your guys' thoughts on crime, and do you think our elected officials are doing enough to curb the rising crime on island?
Yeah, I mean, crime on island is crazy. For a small island like Guam, which you can circle in a whole day, crime is just rampant. What do you guys think about that?
Wow. Okay, as a single woman who lives alone, and I'm fairly new to the island, I've lived here for just a little over a year. I definitely have never, and I've lived a lot of places by myself, I've never been so scared living anywhere to here. Thank goodness I'm moving into a gated community next week, so
okay.
I'll feel better.
Right on.
But I guess I've never been anywhere with such crime issues. Now, I do cover the crime beat, so I'm much more exposed to it. I'm wondering what it will take for it to change, because I have seen on like almost all the candidates' platforms, crime is important to them.
Yeah.
So what will it take to change it?
Yeah, and let me go off of that, because sexual assault crimes specifically in Guam are twice the rate in the national rate.
It's very alarming, man.
And in an island so small, in an island that's supposed to value an Afat Malik, and in an island that's, everyone knows each other, right? That's absolutely insane. And what's more insane is that these crimes are done oftentimes by people whom the victim knows. So those are just some not so fun facts about sexual assault. But yeah, I definitely agree with you, because I think that there isn't, or at least there hasn't been enough legislation or policy making that has done anything to help lower these rates. Guam doesn't have a sexual education program, a comprehensive one. How are kids supposed to know, what consent is? And then if they don't know what consent is, what does that snowball into later in life regarding the choices they make? And so I definitely feel you. I walking from my car to here was already alarming, and I parked right outside. So yeah,
And-
that's yeah.
And I think, honestly, I think it's where party politics hurts the island. Jim Moylan, I know, recently introduced legislation to raise raise, I think, the threshold in terms of how long people are supposed to be in prison when they commit crimes against women or crimes against children. And so what I know is that through party politics, because the Republicans don't have the majority in the legislature, Democrats oftentimes block it from even getting to the floor, and things like that that are important to all of us aren't discussed. And I think our generation needs to be more vocal about that, and at least let it get to the floor, and at least let it have a public hearing so that people can voice their concerns. You shouldn't feel scared walking from your car into Coffee Slut into Mooning. And I think those are real issues, and I think once we start really talking about those issues, that's what's going to get the electorate out there, and that's what's going to get people voting. We heard from the two other ladies, so I wouldn't mind hearing from you on what are your thoughts on crime?
Well, regarding crime, I think a lot more attention should be on rehabilitation as well.
I agree.
Because our rate of recidivism is pretty high in Guam.
Yeah.
And I think rehabilitation will help more with our rate of crime.
I'm
What do you
going to
guys
go off of that again because that is so true. I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of times, when I'm covering a court case, these people are repeated offenders. They have already been to prison and they have all these other cases against them. And it seems like a lot of them even break their electronic monitoring and they're back again, even with all these warnings. So it is going to take some, to get to the root of the issue, not just throwing them in prison, but giving them programs to really fix what's going on.
Yeah, because the end game is never just a prison sentence. Like, what are you going to do when you're out of prison? And on top of that, I feel like we need more help with our prisoners who get out of prison. The housing issues, they're not able to find housing as well. And they're not able to find jobs as well when they get out of prison. So I think that will help with the,
How about you, Mateo? I'm pretty sure this is one topic that you and your girlfriend talk about a lot.
Yeah, something that comes to mind is a conversation I was just having a couple nights ago where someone that we know very well actually moved to Guam. Don't quote me on this, but it would probably be about 20 to 30 years ago. Decided to start his family here, and his reason, and he's lived in the mainland, he's lived from Puerto Rico, but he decided he wanted to plant his feet here and raise his kids here because there was no crime at that time. And now he's very passionate about what's going on because that's not the world his kids are growing up in. And it breaks my heart that you guys don't feel safe enough walking down the street, because in our culture, Chamorro culture, men are always supposed to not only protect our women but hold them in highest regard, right? And respect them. And the fact that you're not feeling that right now, it's upsetting. It really is. And I'm on board with you on that point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess going back to what Matsuki said, right? It requires rehabilitation, right? It requires this all-encompassing, holistic approach that is gonna help stop people from becoming criminals, right? Or committing crimes in the first place, right? So we need to meet people where they are. We need to provide those services, like you said. Get the things that are causing them to go out and do these crimes, right? Provide those services so that they don't feel like that's the only thing they can do. Provide things like mental health services. And I think the current administration is doing a great job at that, right? At providing those solutions at the initial point where crime starts, let's say, and then also at crime enforcement, law enforcement, right? So we're adding police officers. They raise the salaries of police officers so that we're really attacking it from the top, and we're also attacking it from the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And Rick, your point about getting the youth involved, right? And getting legislation on the floor and stuff. Kiana and I can speak a lot to that. For the first time in Youth Congress history, I'd say, Kiana.
Sure.
Bills passed by the Youth Congress are being introduced right away in the Guam legislature automatically Prior to
And
it, it
passed.
required and passed. So we have
Period
passed
poverty bill?
bills from the Youth Congress into law. Yeah, you should talk about that, Cam.
No, please.
Yeah, so the period poverty bill. Okay, quick summary of what the Youth Congress does, because I feel like a lot of people don't know, and it's also election season, so people can run. The Youth Congress does exactly what the legislature does. We introduce bills, and then those bills that we pass in the Youth Congress go to the legislature, they talk about it, and then they can vote on it, right? So these are real things. One of the things that I co-sponsored along with our speaker and another representative was the Period Poverty Act of 2021, which is now a public law, and it mandates giving free period products to all public elementary, middle, high school, and colleges. So here we are. I'm very proud of that. Yeah, and you had one too, didn't you? Your bill passed.
Oh yeah, so we added youth representatives to the Commissione Fino Tomorrow, and that was
represent.
Yeah, just to ensure that that youth voice for those that are going to carry the language forward is being represented by youth, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wait, so like, headed back to what you were talking about, that period poverty bill, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember my friends read about that somewhere, and all my female friends their first reaction was, where was this when we were in high school? And
I wasn't born yet.
I didn't realize then, well, I'm what, like you're 21, I'm like 25, that's like 4 years.
Right.
So yeah, their first reaction was, where was this? And I jokingly asked, what, you guys didn't have the cash to buy that when we were, and
Ooh, that I won't even start on that.
they were just, it was a funny joke, but then they looked at me and said, if we had stuff like this, our high school life would have been way easier.
No, but here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't know. So girls get their period, right? Crazy, I do, right? But some girls miss that whole week of school because they can't afford tampons or pads. And so if you miss 1 week of school for 10 months, that's 10 weeks of school you're missing. How far behind, were we putting our young girls if we couldn't even provide them these basic necessities? And I think that's where the inspiration for, sponsoring the bill came from. So, yeah.
And to the men here, it's not cheap. Every month,
It is not cheap.
buying the goods is not always cheap.
Wait, so I'm very curious, how much is like one pack of those pads anyways?
$20.
Like $5 to $10.
$5 to
But you don't
$10?
just use one sometimes.
Oh.
That's the thing.
Right. So it's different for everybody, but I mean, it adds up. So that's awesome that you
Yeah.
guys did that.
So
I think the real question here is, why did it take this long
Yeah.
for the bill to pass?
and it seems like something that's so incredibly basic, because like a lot of states have it already, right? So it's like, I don't know why it took so long, but it's here now.
Would you say it's like a gender issue that we have on Guam, like a power issue, gender power issue, or what do you guys think?
I think it's a priority issue, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's great that legislation was passed from the Guam Youth Congress and then adopted from the Guam legislature and passed there as well. I definitely think it's a priority issue, and I think one issue that came up recently, and it was a controversial issue, was the Guam Visitors Bureau spending $20 million within the last fiscal year. And then I think Carl Gutierrez got on the radio, and it was back and forth, and then Lester Carlson got on a few days later, and it wasn't exactly 20 million, but it was 17 million. But what bothered me there was that the media just kind of like left it at that. And like your issue is a priority, right? Women's things for women that they need to for their daily lives.
Basic essentials, yeah.
And I think that's great, and I think that should be a priority.
Yeah.
What I don't think should be a priority is spending 17 million at the Guam Visitors Bureau when tourism has been shut down for the last 3 years. Our hospitals falling apart, our schools are falling apart, and as you guys mentioned, you don't feel safe. And one of the things that really bothered me about all that was this. Lester Carlson came on and said they spent 17 million, and then no one asked any questions as to what that 17 million went to. 17 million can buy every woman on Guam whatever she needs. 17 million could provide homes for the homeless. 17 million could do so many things. And everyone's kind of quiet now because, oh, it was 17 million and not 20 million. So.
I think I have an answer to that question of like, why did it take so long? Okay, and this might be like a controversial thing that I'm about to say, but I'm gonna say it. I think, okay, so this legislation was for young people, for people in school, for people in college, right? And politicians don't normally cater to that group of voters because they know they're not going to come out and vote, right? And so, you know, like something like, do you guys remember when the JFK girls put out a petition about their shorts? We would not have known that, right? If they didn't do that. And that's why it's important that we talk about it and let them know that, hey, these are things we care about. And if you don't take this into consideration, we're not voting for you. So it's definitely because they're looking at us as this group that's like, well, they're not coming out anyway. Like we make up less than 25% of the electorate, right? And, like going out to vote. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, that's really how we solve this whole like apathy, lack of efficacy issue, right? Is empowering youth to do the things that they wish to see in the island. And so, Kiana, you and I planned that Motnam and Hoban Youth Summit, right?
Did we?
In what was that? April. We brought together like 120 different youth.
So long ago.
With support from the Office of the Governor, support from UOG, support from GCC. It was 3 days. 3 days of a youth summit.
Yeah. Did you guys go?
Yeah, we had youth like go through the UN SDGs and figure out like what matters to them. And then they created like this whole action plan. I can share it with you guys later, but it's a great action plan. It's going to be integrated into the G3 framework. So
and they presented it.
Yeah,
to
and we to the cabinet
governor
members. Yeah.
And the LT.
Yeah. So
And-
I think youth empowerment is really there.
And
like
we were
even
heard.
though we may not be voting, right? Even though we want everyone to get out to vote, we're still empowering them with those tools
Yeah.
to shape that future they
Yeah.
wish to see.
And good job, guys. You know, like this is my first time ever hopping into any sort of campaign and all that. Before, I never really paid attention to politics, but I'm so happy to see that there's action being taken by people in our demographic that you guys are, you know, doing a good thing.
Yeah.
You're getting
Even
these
just
things
us
out
being
there.
here, right?
You know, one of the things I wanted to touch up on is I absolutely believe that the basic necessities for women, for people our demographic, you know, should come forward. But, you know, maybe, might be ignorance, but maybe giving a little bit of slack, right? If we're thinking about it in a way where we just came out from a pandemic that the whole entire world shut down, what's first on your mind? What's second? What's third? What's 30th? Right? And I guess giving a little bit of pardon and forgiveness that maybe these things don't come top of mind, but I'm glad that you guys are here to be able to push those things forward and bring it top of mind. So I mean, giving people that are in office a chance, because there's a whole lot of stuff breaking down, right? And these are things that actually affect people's ability to be sheltered, people's ability to eat, people's ability to see anything on groceries, you know, in the grocery stores, on the shelves. To kind of focus on that. So I just want to give it that. I don't like anger. I'm one of those people that really doesn't like anger towards anybody. And, you know, I like to be
I'm a Catholic.
devil's advocate, right? So, but yeah.
Yeah, you're right about priorities coming out of the pandemic. People are concerned about what's affecting their wallets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a big thing for me as a young person was this infusion of like, you know, just straight cash into people's pockets, which really helps. You know, you're not putting it behind needing to meet all these requirements, or you're not saying you can only use it for these purposes. I thought that was really cool, right? That we're just giving money directly to people to help them, right? We're putting cash directly into pockets. And I get that I get that from a lot of people my age, right? That they appreciate that we're not having to jump through hoops to get pandemic aid or what. It's just going pretty much to everyone. If you're eligible for it, if you meet the income guidelines, right, you get it. Yeah, so I think that's great. I think infusion of resources into things like the infrastructure, right? The governor's plan to build a new hospital. I think that's all great. Sorry, it's really hitting at things that are affecting our day-to-day, right? Potholes, you guys said, there's roads being paved everywhere. Yeah, so I think it's about doing that long-term planning while at the same time attacking these issues that are affecting us today, the day-to-day, right? So that we can get to that long-term future that we all wish for.
I think you're exactly right, though, and that's where my frustration lies. And not to try and be angry about anything, but as I mentioned earlier, right, GVB spent 17 million. We have a labor and delivery ward that's falling apart. Dr. Shea has been super vocal about it. And I think they went through the numbers, and it would have took roughly 20 million to fix it. I have 2 little kids. My wife is a new mom. I had one baby at Sagua and the other baby at the hospital, and it's just really unfortunate the type of circumstances women have to go through at our Guam Memorial Hospital. And I think it comes down to a lack of priorities. And you mentioned the money going out. Yeah, it's nice, but there's still 300 million sitting in the bank for what? And I think those are the big issues, and those are the things that we need to be vocal about. We need to hold elected officials' feet to the fire and demand results, right? Why is that money sitting there? Why aren't things getting fixed? So GVB spent 17 million, but if you walk through all the public restrooms in Tumon, they're awful. Tourists are getting robbed. Where's that money going? To me, it's frustrating.
And that goes back to that thing about long-term planning, right? If we were to take let's say, that money sitting in the bank and infuse it all into the economy now, that results in this huge boom now, right? But think about the future. Congress is allocating that money, I think, until 2026. And if we spend it all, 4 years too early, what does that mean for us? What does that mean for 4 years down the line, even for, let's say, our, not my kids necessarily, but other people's kids later down the line?
Yeah. And I think the important thing to remember, so for me, it's like this, right? As young people, I'm 21, I'm graduating, I need to find a job in like 3 months, and I'm like freaking out. And as someone my age, and as someone who's friends with people my age, we're like always thinking about the future, right? And I think something that's important to remember is that we're going to talk about a lot of issues today. We're talking about all these issues: crime, potholes, periods, whatever, right? But the thing is, like, we're talking about these now, but change and quality and effective change doesn't happen in a month or a year or 2 years. It's this long-term thing, so that, for us, when we're older, life will be stable and it'll be better. And, nothing changes overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day or 2 or 3 or 4. So yeah, I think I agree with you on that, Nolan. Yeah, I think another thing that's like a really hot issue right now is the issue of choice. The whole pro-life versus pro-choice community has totally come out this year with, firstly, the heartbeat bill that was introduced, and then secondly, the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And, abortion and access to abortion has become this really huge thing that a lot of people, young people especially, are looking at voting towards this election, right? People want to vote for people. If they're pro-life, they want to vote for pro-life people. If they're pro-choice, they want to vote for pro-choice people. And as someone who is in an organization that advocates for comprehensive sexual education and access to abortion, I think, Hannah mentioned it earlier, sexual assault crimes in an island where it's so high, to not be able to choose what I can do with my body and to not have these opportunities to choose the direction that my future will go in, especially as someone who is at an age that can get pregnant, is terrifying. And so I think this election season for me, something that was really important to me when I was casting my ballot was whether or not, these politicians or leaders or whatever you want to call them are supportive of my right to choose what to do with my body.
Yeah, and I hope people would take a kind of intersectional approach with those reproductive justice issues. Yeah. Because it's mostly affecting the marginalized community. So
yeah, absolutely.
I wish they would look at it with a social injustice or social inequality.
As opposed to religious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I definitely think it's a big issue, and I want to make it clear that right now I'm just speaking as a one-man guy, right? I'm not speaking on behalf of the campaign or anything like that. I do think it's a huge issue, and I do think that it's something that it's so big of an issue that it should be something that goes to a referendum. And I think the electorate should decide on the direction that it goes. That being said, I think it should be taken in steps, right? And it goes back to the priorities I mentioned earlier. We need to make sure we're providing all the contraceptives and women's needs and stuff like that. And before something like that goes to a vote, we need to make sure we're supporting foster families. I know Harvest House has done a great job in supporting that type of stuff. And so it takes the community coming together on an issue like that, such a polarizing issue, right? And I'll say that I'm pro-life, but that's just me personally. That's how I was raised, and that's the household my mother brought me up in. But I do understand it's a huge issue, and I do understand the complexity that comes with the issue, right? And so sometimes I think that it's just an election topic that's rushed without providing all the educational value that people need.
Sure.
And from contraceptives to, I think before any bills passed, we need to make sure that there's like some sort of incentive for foster families. There's the day after pill, like at every high school. There's birth control at every high school. And all those kind of things need to be implemented first before we rush to pass any sort of legislation.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I see things a little differently. I think there's no need for a referendum. I think people have really made their choice on a woman's right to choose, and that women should have that right. We saw when the Heartbeat Act was introduced, right? We saw just this huge outpouring of opposition, right? This huge, our youth being mobilized in ways that we haven't seen before, I'd say. And it's great that we have leaders like the governor, like Governor Luliang Guerrero, who are out there. She was at the protest, right, Kiana?
Correct.
She spoke at the protest, and I think it goes to this bigger thing of needing to make the hard decisions, whether they're unpopular, right? Whether they're gonna lose you votes. And I see leadership from Lou and Josh in that sense, right? That even with things like the pandemic, they were able to make that hard decision. They saved lives, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that you brought up the foster families, because I think a lot of the issue I have with the pro-life politicians is that the life that they care about are not the ones that are already here, right? I think being pro-life means you support policies that help the homeless, that help foster families, that help people in shelters, that help the marginalized, that help people who don't eat every day. I think that's what being pro-life is. It's caring about life, right? But if these politicians only care about life when it's in the womb, AKA when it's convenient for them, I think that's where my problem is, right? Because, you can be, if someone can say, I'm pro-life for me, but, if you want to make that choice, then I'll let you make that choice. But completely restricting women's and those who can get pregnant's ability to choose what they want to do with their bodily autonomy, that's where I have my issue.
I think that's, forgive me, I don't know if that's a really good way to represent why certain politicians are pro-life. I think, especially on the Republican side, we definitely do care about life in every stage and every circumstance, right? Like I personally don't believe that you should get the death penalty. I think that there are a lot of ways to get you out of being murdered because you did wrong, right? And one of the things that I'm an advocate for is the woman's ability to choose. There are many choices. Abortion is not the only choice. That choice is a very hard choice. It's it's very uncomfortable. It's very expensive. There are plenty of choices to make before that. And I like what he was talking about, where we have these things accessible, right? If you're gonna drink, you're probably gonna get a hangover, right? What do? You drink some water, you eat some food before you go to sleep, all of these different things to prevent that, right? So we know, and I'm sorry, a lot of times sex probably isn't consensual, but if it happens, Plan B is a lot cheaper than an abortion.
But, sorry, go ahead. I'm not even gonna start, honestly.
No, I really think the issue here, right, is that women need to be supported at every stage, right? So like you said, Rick, like you're saying, we need to support them with education, right? We need to support everyone with education on contraceptives. We need to support them with period products. We need to support them with actually providing those contraceptives even. Maybe that's the next step we need to take, right? Providing those in schools.
Right.
And when it comes to that right to choose, we need to support them there as well.
One of the things you mentioned though was leadership, and I think maybe on that topic there's leadership, but on topics of crime, at the hospitals, schools, there's definitely a lack of leadership, and that's why I'm supporting the challenger in this election, because we need leadership in AdLoop, and we need a new season. We need people that are going to push the right agenda, and not just for those that are in. And I think that's the biggest problem with what we're seeing on the island today, is that it's only those that are in that are benefiting from what's going on the island.
And a little bit of a controversial topic to close out on, but we're out of time. How do you guys feel? Great discussion going on tonight. Yeah, a lot of different opinions, but a lot of good opinions. It's so important to hear what other people think and just be able to talk freely. That's how things get moving. But we're going to go ahead and close out with a little round robin. You want to start out?
Sure. You know, I think at the end of the day, we all fight for the same things. We all don't like the crime on this island. We all don't like the thought of ourselves growing old in an economy that is hard to live in. We all don't like the thought of more deaths, more discomfort. So, which is exactly why I appreciate being able to meet you guys, sit down with you guys, hear what you guys have to say. Extending olive branches, and yeah, grateful for this.
So, you know, this roundtable is super cool. I got to hear everybody's opinion, but whether you are a voter or whether you're apathetic, I think everybody should just do what they want and do the research necessary to pursue what they want.
Yeah. Get registered and go vote. Period.
I'm going to go off of that too. Get out there and vote. It's so important. It comes down to the little issues, the big issues. Our everyday lives depend on it. So now's your chance to be heard.
Again, thank you KUAM, thank you Our Generation. I think more of these are great. I know KUAM is doing the hub and we got a lot of old heads talking every week, but I think Our Generation should be doing this more frequently. I think we get to the meat and potatoes of what really matters, and I think that's really what's going to get the electorate out. And so please vote. I think at the end of the day, like I said in the beginning, what benefits the island most is that all voices are heard, and so get out there and vote and let your voice be heard.
So I think regarding voter apathy, like in the beginning we said that young people our age, our demographic, they don't vote because they don't care, but I think we can conclude that we all care. Our youth cares, it's just that we don't feel our leaders hear our voices. So go out there and vote.
Yeah, exactly. Echoing the same sentiments of everyone. I think, you know, this conversation is great. Thank you, KUAM. Thank you both for joining us. Hopefully people see this, right? Youth see this and they're like, wow, I want to get involved in that conversation. I want to vote. I want to get out and, you know, that makes sense to me. I like that. I don't like that. I hope that gets them out to vote.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to add, a lot of people in our generation say they don't know people's platforms. There's plenty of ways. We have a show called The Hotspot. We brought every single candidate on the show. There's ways you can figure out people's platforms. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you on Super Tuesday.
Yeah, can I plug Argen? Visit us or find us at Argen on Instagram. We have info on our platform, opportunity, unity, respect.
And what about you guys?
Yeah, Generation of Promise Guam on Instagram. You can find out what we're all about, where we're going to be, and how you can get involved.
All right. Thank you guys.
Be well.
Thank you, KUAM.